Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time you're watching this video. It's me again, Teacher Kent, and today we are going to review all about our future topic, and that is rock cycle. So, I found a website or a PDF on the internet, and let's review it together. It's a comprehensive file about rock cycle and the types of rocks. So at the same time, it's like both a review on what type of rocks and a preview of the rock cycles. So let's start. Let me just share my screen. There you go. And I think I'll make this okay. Maybe I can make this a bit bigger. Well, I can make this a bit bigger. I guess this is it. Now let's continue. Rocks. The life of a rock. Usually when we talk about rocks or life, it usually talks about living things. And I think you know that a rock, it's not really a living thing. However, the life of a rock can also be called as a rock cycle. That's right. The life of a rock can also be called a life cycle. Now, the word cycle comes from the word circle. That's right. The life of a rock is the rock cycle or the rock circle. And there are three types of rocks. We have igneous rock, we have sedimentary rock, and we have metamorphic rocks. Now, the rock cycle, from the word circle, it means that it goes around. What is at the top will be at the bottom, and what will be at the bottom will be at the top. So let's look at the simple rock cycle here. Okay, we see that a sedimentary rock right here needs changes from pressure and heat to become a metamorphic rock, while metamorphic rocks need to be melted by lava or by magma for it to become an igneous rock. And an igneous rock will need to become a sediment and join together to become a sedimentary rock. Now that is a simple life cycle for rock. However, however, that is not just the case, because the igneous rock will also become a metamorphic rock when this happens, when changes are made from heat and pressure. The same can be said to the metamorphic rock. It can become a sedimentary rock if the layers of sediment or the metamorphic rock slowly becomes sediment, and then it will become a sedimentary rock. Finally, sedimentary rocks can become igneous rocks too when they are melted by magma or lava, and when the rock hardens and it becomes cool or it becomes cold. Now, I know that's a bit complicated, but don't worry, we have more to learn. Okay, rocks become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and even smaller by these factors, by erosion, by wind, by earthquake, by floods, by rain, by landslides, or even by man. That's right, even us. We make rocks smaller and smaller. Now, first things first, what is erosion? Erosion is when the weathered rock and soil starts to move. Like, for example, there's a big rock in the ocean, and the ocean has waves, okay? The waves hit the rock. When the waves hit the rock, it doesn't usually break the rock. The rock, it seems to be fine, right? Well, after many, many years, thousands of times that the water hits a rock, the rock will slowly become smaller and smaller and smaller and very smaller. That process is called erosion. How about wind? How does wind make a rock become smaller? Well, let's say there is a very strong wind and the wind hits the rock and the rock is carried by the wind where it falls down a cliff. When it falls down, some of the rocks will break. Thus, that is how wind actually makes rocks smaller. And also, if there is rain and the rain has strong wind, it will hit the water will hit the rock much faster because of the wind, and it will cause the rock to even break down more. And that is how rocks become smaller. Earthquake. I think that's understandable. If there's an earthquake, it will break open the ground. And sometimes some rocks fall into the pit or the part of the ground that has a large crack. When it goes down and it is hurt, or when it goes down and there is magma or lava underneath, it will become smaller. It will melt and become another type of rock. By floods, like I said, the floods are from water, right? And water can slowly break down rocks over time. Not to mention that if there is flood, that means some of the rocks will actually be carried away by the water. And if they hit other hard objects, they might become smaller. By rain, I told that before. By landslides, the same thing. And finally, by man. How do you think rocks become smaller by man? Now, imagine that you are on a hiking trip or you are climbing a mountain. When you climb the mountain, you notice that there's something wrong. That there is a place that is a path, but there's no cement, which means that who made the path? Who made the area where you can walk? Well, it's actually made by a lot of people walking that same area. If a lot of people walk in that same area, over time, no plants will grow there because they know that that area is where people walk. Now imagine that there is a rock, that area. What do you think will happen when people keep walking on the rock? It will slowly break and become smaller and smaller. And that is how humans break rock. And sometimes when we mine, we try to get minerals from the earth, we get the rocks. The rocks become smaller because we break them. And that's it. Now let's continue. Let me discuss more terms. Weathering, the breaking up of rocks and soil. Okay, weathering and erosion are not really the same things. They are connected, but they're not actually the same. Weathering actually allows erosion to take place. Erosion is when rocks and soil break up, when it gets weathered over time. Now, when does this happen? This happens in a desert, okay? Let's say there's a desert, and in the desert, there's no rain. So what will happen? it will become very, very dry. So when the wind comes, the strong wind comes, some soil is actually moved or carried away by the wind. And what will happen? Only big rocks will remain. The rocks that are not carried by the wind. That is an example of weathering. Erosion is the moving of weathered rock and soil. When there is weathering, let's say the rock is left and there's no more soil on top of the rock. When the time comes that there's a strong rain, it might slowly break the rock. Because if there was no weathering, there was still soil on top of the rock, the soil will absorb the water. But since the soil is carried away by the wind, erosion can finally take place on a rock that's hiding underground. Next, here are some products of weathering: clay or sand, not just the wind, but also water, floods. If the area becomes flooded, the soil becomes clay-like. And when the soil becomes clay and people pass through it, or animals pass through it, they will carry the soil and then, or the clay, and then it will leave the rock to be open. Here are the products of weathering again: clay, sand, and rock fragments, pebbles, and stones. Rocks change by earthquakes, by volcanoes, or by heat and pressure. When there is an earthquake and there's a big rock, sometimes the big rock will be part of the earthquake. It will crack in half. And when volcanoes erupt and they hit some rocks, the rocks will melt. And when the rocks stop melting, it will become cold again. It will become igneous rock. So rocks will change. Or by heat and pressure, when there is a big, like volcanic eruption, and some rocks flatten other smaller rocks. And the area is already very hot because of the volcano. Then the smaller rocks will slowly become much smaller. They will change again to metamorphic rocks. Okay, we're done with that. Let's review the types of rocks. Sedimentary rock is rock formed when layers of small particles of shell, rock, and sand join together. Look at the picture here. That's 3 layers. It's a combination of shell, rock, and sand. They join together. And how they are made? Wind and water break down the earth. Bits of earth settle in lakes and rivers, and layers are formed and build up. Pressure and time turns the layers to rock. So those layers are what we call sediments. Here are the types of sedimentary rocks. We got sandstone, limestone, gypsum, conglomerate, and shale. Now, look at all of these types of rocks. You will understand that these types of rocks are sedimentary rocks. You might find them in what we call, you will find them when we are near rivers or lakes, okay? Because that is where sedimentary rocks are formed. The most common sedimentary rock has to be sandstone. If I have to pick one, I would say it would have to be sandstone because it's a combination of sand and some other materials. Limestone, it's not as common. Shale may be common. Conglomerate, it looks beautiful, but no. I don't think they're as abundant as sandstone. And that is it for today. Next time when we have our class, we're finally tackling about the rock cycle. So please listen. Don't worry, we will review this again during our class, especially igneous and metamorphic rocks. So I will see you again. Goodbye. Oh wait, let me just stop. I will see you again, and please turn on your cameras when we have our class, okay? Goodbye.